very specialized language and things in these. So if you see something and you're kind of confused about it, give us a call. We'll be happy to walk you through that. Gretchen is a guru on this. She is very knowledgeable in this topic and can answer any question that you could come up with. So the reason why we set the meeting up today as we did and have the rules for environmental planning criteria and the water plan leading into land use is pretty straightforward, and that is the direct association with water quality, with environmental sensitive areas, and future development, and existing development for that matter. And that's really going to be the large portion of today. This is one of the most significant topics and elements of the comprehensive plan process. It's your future land use. And this is the part of the plan that specifically deals with what is the community or the county and each of its cities going to look like in terms of future development. Where are the different kinds of land uses and developments going to go? Where can they go and where shouldn't they go? And the way this is done, there's two different ways to do land use planning in Georgia in comprehensive plans. One way are future development maps. The other way is future land use maps. What Gilmer County, Ellijay, and East Ellijay have are future land use maps. And future land use maps are a little bit more specific in terms of the land use types. Future development maps can get a little bit more into just the look and feel of things and the character of an area versus the specific permitted type land use that can be allowed there. Future land use maps are a lot more similar to what a zoning ordinance does. And that tells you about, this is where the commercial development should go. This is where the agriculture development should go. And into residential, high density, low density. And so it's much more specific and honed into the specific type of land use, what can be done, what type of development can occur on specific areas in the county and each of the cities. So what we're going to do is to take a look first and foremost at the previous or current land use maps that are in the comprehensive plan, that are in place as we speak. The significance of this portion of the plan, the land use plan, is that because Ellijay, East Ellijay, and Gilmer County unincorporated each have a zoning ordinance, it is required by state law as part of the Georgia zoning procedures law that in every decision process, or every zoning decision, so when someone, an individual, a developer, or the city or county petitions to rezone a parcel of land or multiple parcels of land, they have to go through this whole process. That process being, they have to post a sign on the property. They have to post an ad, a legal ad in the paper to notify the public that there's going to be a change in the zoning of a property. They also have to essentially analyze that rezoning request. So someone on staff has to go through and assess that rezoning and determine whether or not what's being requested is something that should be approved or denied. And the criteria that are used to make that determination are set in the zoning procedures law. And that's, if anybody really wants to take a deep dive into that, you can look up OCGA 36-66. And there's several sections of that deal with the zoning procedures law. And what that gets into is when someone goes to request a rezoning and is proposing to rezone the property, the county or the city has to look at what impact that may or may not have on the public at large. Specifically, those properties or neighbors that are adjacent, immediately adjacent to the property in question, and whether or not what they're proposing to rezone and do might have a negative impact on the value property or some impact on their quality of life, the ability to have public health, safety, welfare, and enjoyment of their own property. Now, there's a lot of subjectivity to some of that. Some of it is fairly straightforward. But there are several criteria. One of those is whether or not the zoning that's being proposed is similar or different than the zoning that exists around that property already. Then there's the portion that deals with could what's being proposed have a negative impact on someone's property value. And it goes into things like public health. So is there something being proposed that could impact public health around the area? So that deals generally with things that are commercial or, more importantly, industrial in use, most likely, that could produce pollution, noise, air, water, etc. And on into the zoning standards, you deal with things like spot zoning, and that deals back to, are you trying to put an industrial park in the middle of a residential community? That's a very baseline zoning way of looking at it. And that's how zoning came to be back in the 1920s and so forth around the country, and has grown and grown to the point where now it's more common than not for communities to have zoning ordinance, primarily to prevent things that are going to have a major negative impact on the community and the public's health, safety, and welfare. One of those criteria in the zoning procedures law says, or states that would the proposed rezoning be in agreement with what is in your joint comprehensive plan? And specifically in the land use portion of the plan is where they're going to go to look at that. Now, it's important to understand that while that is a factor and a critical process for us to do in this comprehensive plan update, that is one element in the comprehensive plan and one element in the zoning procedures law. And in terms of zoning decisions, it is not always the end-all be-all decision maker in a rezoning. But it is certainly a factor and must be assessed in every single zoning decision that's made for the city or the county. And with that being said, that's just a lead in into why this is important and why we want to make sure we do a good job of making sure that these maps are accurately reflecting as best as possible the type of land use development that the community wants to see moving forward. The areas that need to be preserved, the areas that need to be remain sort of low density, and then, of course, where is the potential for commercial development and even industrial or manufacturing. Maybe that's something. I know there's not a lot of that in Gilmer County, but that's something to consider in this process as well. And when we look at a land use map, we're not just looking at 5 years in advance. We do these updates every 5 years. There's a portion of this plan that only deals with 5 years, and that is the work program where we talk about at the end of this the specific projects that the local governments are going to take on. We update that every 5 years, and it changes every 5 years. These future development maps are really, you want to think more along the lines of 25 or 30 years in advance and looking at the future landscape. So don't just think about 5 years ahead, because we know that's going to happen very quickly. Think about land use 25, 30 years from now, and what this landscape is going to look like in terms of development. Now, we have the maps here, and what we'll probably do is kind of create a greater degree of separation between these. The majority of folks on this committee are representatives selected by the unincorporated county, because of course the county is the largest geographical footprint jurisdiction. And what we'll do is separate. So we've got the county map up here. We're going to have the city maps. We'll spread those out on the table. And so the representatives for each of those jurisdictions, whether you're here to represent the unincorporated county or one of the two cities, then you'll separate and look at the maps. And of course, we can break up too, and folks can move around and look at those different maps and make sure that what you see is in alignment with the best interest of the community moving forward. We also have on these maps, you have the legend, which is going to show you the different areas. So you can see the agriculture, commercial, forestry, etc. And we have with that, on each of these maps, a breakdown of what each of those means. And they're fairly general and fairly straightforward, so you can take a look at those. Something important to mention as we update this plan is that those baseline descriptions for what is commercial, what is industrial, and the differences in low, medium, and high density residential, keep in mind that that's something that we can update. If we need to be more specific, if we need to look at things to add to that, to again be more specific, be more strategic in what each of these districts means, then we can absolutely do that. Something that we'll probably talk about in the plan also is the impact of things like tourism, agritourism, that impact on the community, as well as things like the commercial development and the more conventional tourism that's more commercially based. But just a couple of quick snips. The agriculture commodity reports, I believe the most recent one we have is 2022. When we looked up and pulled those numbers, Gilmer County is #2 in the state of Georgia in 159 counties in agritourism. So things like your wineries, vineyards that are actually producing and using kind of the Georgia grown model for their production. Obviously the apple orchards and those kind of establishments doing agritourism are contributing a lot to that. I was surprised that the #1 agritourism community is actually Cherokee County, so pretty close by. But that's kind of shocking to me that Cherokee County is larger agritourism, and that number was over $7 million a year just in agritourism. And when you look at the breakdown in farm gate values in that agricultural report, and the farm gate values, they delve into what is the value of the commodity that is being exported from the farm itself. So that's not wholesale, that is specifically the value of just the farm values. That's what the farmer's making, or they're grossing essentially from their farm. That's not the final product. And that value for Gilmer County is over $244 million. That's almost $250 million in agricultural contribution to your local economy. The largest, I don't think it'll be any surprise to anyone, for farm gate value production in Gilmer County is poultry, which is $210 million, almost $211. Agritourism coming in at #2, apples at just under $5 million. So it's pretty impressive the amount of contribution that agriculture makes in Gilmer County and agritourism. So that's something I did want to mention, that you'll see that one of the largest, probably the largest, land use overlay on this map is agriculture for Gilmer County. So it does play a significant role in the local economy. Just wanted to make a mention of that very quickly. And what we'll do at this point is we will break up into groups. We'll separate these maps out. This is going to take some time, so just get comfortable, take a look at these maps, kind of get familiar with them, and look at those legends. And anywhere on these maps you see changes that need to be made, things that we're missing, overlooking, areas that we may need to change. We've got these big markers here, so feel free to draw on these maps. These are working maps. We're not going to preserve these or put these in a frame or anything. These are for us to use during this process. And any of these changes that we would be proposing, we could make those to the draft and present those to the elected officials as the plan is approaching its draft form. So do take time to look at these very closely and make any notes that you see need to be made. And on any of those land use categories, you got a pen, we've got plenty of pens. If you don't have one and you want to write on those, something we might want to consider, again, addressing on the land use categories, make a note of that on there, and we'll make sure to change that. If you do make notes on those land use categories, make sure you get that to me, and that way we can take a look at that, mention it to the group, and make sure we can get a consensus on any of entire group has an opportunity to review any of those proposed changes before we make them to the draft.
That's a quick question.
Yes, ma'am.
Are all the wineries included in the agricultural category?
I believe that if they are growing the grapes,
If they have a farm winery license, then they are. Right. If they don't have a farm
So would
winery
most,
license.
would most of the wineries have that?
that's an excellent question, right? I'm glad you mentioned farm winery, so that's a specific license through the state of Georgia to be able to operate that farm winery where you're actually growing a portion percentage. You know, that percentage offhand for farm winery. How many grapes you have to actually grow?
50%.
50%, okay.
So farm stores too, like Mountain Valley would be part of the agricultural revenue?
I would imagine
Yeah,
that.
if they have a farm
Are
store.
they growing and selling?
Because we have a lot more of those now.
That's absolutely a part of that. Yeah, cantaloupes were a big contributor. I was surprised that cantaloupes are in over $100,000 in sales of cantaloupe here in Gilmer County, which surprised me. I didn't realize that. That's not an insignificant number for farm gate value of cantaloupe. So, some interesting things there, and you can look that up and take a deep dive into it. We pulled the most significant things, and again, poultry, obviously number one, huge portion of agricultural economy. And for Northwest Georgia, in our region, our 15 counties in Northwest Georgia, several years ago, I have not checked it very recently, several years ago, Northwest Georgia farm gate value production, over $750 million, over $750 million in poultry production in Northwest Georgia. So it's a major contributor to the state's economy, obviously, and to the local economy. And of course, you all don't just have farm production here in Gilmer County, you have processing, which is another element to that economy at the Pilgrims plant here. So a lot of contribution from agriculture, and that's only going, I think, to continue probably in the future to grow as they continue to build and support infrastructure for that. So with all that being said, does anybody have any general questions? Of course, I'm going to walk around here, so if y'all run into questions, I'll obviously be available as we're working on this. But anybody have any general questions about land use, impacts, zoning? All right, well, with that, we'll break up into groups. We got the county unincorporated up on this end. We also have a copy of the county zoning map, just since it's the largest area and the most likely to potentially change over time. You can look up there and kind of see the zoning map and how does the zoning map and this future land use map sort of compare. We've got city maps down here, so we'll separate those out. Everybody can stand up and walk around. Straight away.
Good morning. How are you doing? Good. Good. You always look so well put together. First thing in the morning, look at you.
Excuse me.